The city never slept, especially not on stormy nights. Rain slammed the windows of luxury high-rises and soaked the worn-out streets below, washing away footsteps, regrets, and sometimes even secrets. In the heart of it all, towering over the glistening skyline, was the Helix Tower, home to one of the youngest and most powerful CEOs in the country, Adrian Blackwood. Adrian, at just 32, had built an empire from the ground up. Brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. That's what the media called him. Yet beneath the surface of his perfectly tailored suits and calculated charm was a man exhausted by isolation and haunted by the weight of his past. Tonight, though, the ghosts were louder. And fate, unknowingly, was about to rewrite his life forever. It was nearing midnight when Adrian left an investors' gala, frustrated and half-drunk, ignoring the repeated warnings from his driver. "Sir, the bridge is under alert. The storm's getting worse." But Adrian waved him off and insisted on walking the last few blocks alone. He needed air. He needed silence. He needed to forget. His polished shoes splashed through puddles as he walked across the deserted river bridge, the wind howling against his coat like a furious whisper. Street lights flickered overhead. Then it happened too quickly to react. A black van skidded onto the bridge. The doors flew open. Two masked figures leapt out and charged at him. One grabbed him from behind, the other reached for his wallet, or so he thought. But then Adrian saw the glint of metal. It wasn't a mugging. It was something else. Something deliberate. Panic surged through his chest. He struggled, shouting, but the storm swallowed his cries. The knife came down and didn't land. A shadow emerged from the alley near the bridge entrance. A girl. Unassuming. Barely more than a silhouette in the storm. Without a word, she hurled a rock at the attacker, hitting him squarely. Then she rushed forward and tackled the second man, surprising them both. They scuffled. Adrian, shaken, managed to punch the first assailant before both fled into the night. Silence returned, shaky, surreal. He turned to the girl, drenched in rain, hair plastered to her pale face, lips trembling. "Who are you?" he asked, chest still heaving. She stared at him. For a moment it looked like she might answer. But instead she turned and ran, without a word, vanishing into the rain and fog like a ghost. 3 days passed. The incident made no headlines. Adrian, used to controlling narratives, chose to keep this one private. But it wouldn't leave his mind. Not just because she saved his life, but because of the way she disappeared like she was never meant to be seen. He reviewed every camera angle on the bridge, but the storm had fried half the surveillance. The remaining footage was blurred, distorted. Only one frame stood out, a single still where her face, half-turned, flickered under a lamplight. White eyes, wet lashes, a scar near her temple. He printed it. He studied it every night. Why would a complete stranger risk everything to save him? Who was she? And why did she look so familiar? Across the city, in a quiet neighborhood nestled between forgotten bookstores and antique shops, lived a girl named Lila Harrow. Lila worked as a part-time librarian and sometimes painted portraits for cash. She was shy, rarely made eye contact, and never stayed too long in one place. People barely noticed her. And that's how she liked it. Except lately, her heart wouldn't settle. Every night, she replayed the moment on the bridge. The look in his eyes, not just fear but pain. The kind of pain she knew intimately. The kind of pain that said, "I don't care if I survive." Lila had recognized him instantly. Adrian Blackwood, the golden boy of business. The same man whose company had once, indirectly, destroyed her father's life. Years ago, her father had worked for Blackwood Holdings, a loyal manager who blew the whistle on a major internal fraud. But the company buried it. He was fired, shamed, and within a year he took his own life. The case never saw light. Lila had grown up learning to keep her head down. But that night, seeing Adrian, vulnerable, attacked, human, she had acted without thinking. She hated him. Didn't she? So why couldn't she stop thinking about him now? Adrian wasn't the kind of man who let things go. He launched a private search, hired a team, and began combing through hospital records, public transit footage, anything to find the girl with the scar. His assistant Marcus warned him. "You're obsessing over a stranger, sir. She saved your life, sure, but maybe she doesn't want to be found." "That's what makes me need to find her," Adrian said quietly. "No one disappears like that unless they have a reason." He wasn't wrong. One evening, while walking through a local art exhibit his sister had begged him to attend, Adrian stopped dead in his tracks. Hanging on the far wall was a small portrait. Dark, haunting. A girl in the rain, her face turned just slightly away. But he knew that face. The scar. Eyes. His heart thudded. "Who painted this?" he demanded. The gallery host blinked. That would be Lila Harrow. She brings in pieces sometimes. Doesn't stay long. Bit of a recluse." He bought the painting on the spot, and got her contact information. But when he visited the address, the apartment was already vacated. A neighbor said she'd left that morning. Said something about needing to disappear again. Sounded scared. Adrian stood in the empty hallway, staring at the dust floating in the slanted sunlight, frustration boiling in his chest. Why was she running? He didn't realize the answer would shake him to his core. That night, back in his penthouse, Adrian poured himself a drink and pulled out the portrait again. He studied the brush strokes, the emotion, the storm she'd painted. It wasn't just a scene, it was a memory. His memory. She hadn't just been there that night. She had seen him before. Suddenly it clicked. Years ago, his early days in the company. He'd visited a regional office during an internal audit. There had been a man. Middle-aged, nervous, speaking truth Adrian had ignored. And in the corner of that office, a girl. Teenager maybe. Sketching quietly in a notebook. She had his eyes. Whoa. Her father had begged for justice. And Adrian, then too ambitious to care, had turned away. His breath caught in his throat. She hadn't saved his life to protect him. She had saved him out of something deeper. Maybe mercy. Maybe revenge twisted by empathy. Maybe fate. But now she was gone again. Outside, the rain began to fall once more. Lila, boarding a train out of the city, stared at the seat across from her. Me. Like the spaces she left in every life she touched. Like the ache in her chest she refused to name. She told herself it was over. But the heart has a memory. And some stories don't end at goodbye. They begin with it. 2 weeks had passed, but for Adrian Blackwood, time had warped into something unrecognizable. Days blurred into nights, and nights into memories he couldn't silence. The portrait still hung on the wall of his office, a constant reminder of the girl whose silence screamed louder than any boardroom argument he'd ever faced. Lila Harrow. Her name echoed in his mind like a secret knocking to be heard. He wasn't just chasing a mystery anymore. He was chasing redemption. Lila sat by the window of a worn-out train headed toward the quiet coastal town of Averlin. It was the kind of place people didn't think to look for you. The kind of place where fog rolled over cliffs like whispered secrets and sea winds stole your name before it reached another soul. She hadn't planned on going back there. Not since her father's death. But the weight in her chest refused to lift, and the memory of Adrian's eyes, stormy and lost on that bridge, haunted her more than it should have. She had saved him. Why? She couldn't answer that even to herself. Maybe because in that moment she saw something in him no one else could. Not the CEO, not the billionaire. Just a broken man. And Lila had always been drawn to broken things. Adrian's team finally found a lead. A freight train employee recalled a girl matching Lila's description boarding a late-night train to Averlin. It was a thread, frayed and fragile, but it was enough. Adrian left everything behind. No meetings, no calls. Just a suitcase, a car, and a need he couldn't explain. Averlin hadn't changed much. The cliffs still wept mist every morning, and the town still moved at a pace slow enough to feel like time stood still. Adrian checked into the only inn that had ocean-facing rooms and asked about Lila Harrow. The owner shook his head. Don't get many folks by that name here. But I've seen a girl wandering the beach at sunrise. Doesn't talk to anyone. That was all he needed. Lila found solace in the ocean's rage. She walked barefoot along the sand every dawn, letting the cold waves kiss her skin like a reminder that she was still here. Still real. Still running. But that morning she wasn't alone. She sensed him before she saw him. She turned and there he was. Adrian. Standing a few feet away, hair tousled by sea wind, jacket too thin for the cold, eyes locked on her like he was afraid she'd vanish again. Her heart jumped. So did her mind. Run. Feet. Choose. But she did neither. He stepped forward. You saved my life. Twice if you count that night. And the one I've been living since. She said nothing. He continued. Why did you run? She looked away, jaw tight. Because I wasn't supposed to help you. That stopped him cold. Was it revenge? He asked quietly. No, she whispered. It should have been. But it wasn't. They sat on a broken bench overlooking the sea, the silence between them thick with years of unspoken things. Adrian finally spoke. I remember your father. Lila stiffened. He told the truth. Buried it. I didn't have the power back then, or maybe I did and I just didn't have the courage. Either way, I failed him. I failed you. You didn't just fail us, she said, voice trembling. You helped destroy us. Adrian bowed his head. I know. I came here to ask for your forgiveness, he said. But now that I'm here, I don't know if I deserve it. Lila looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time. The arrogance was gone. The CEO was gone. What remained was a man, stripped of every shield. She stood up. You don't. Then she walked away. But that wasn't the end. Later that evening, she found a letter slipped under her door. Lila. I've lived my whole life running from what I broke. You're the only person who ever made me stop long enough to see it. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me help fix what I can. I bought back the property your father lost. It's yours now. Do what you want with it. Burn it. Sell it. Or maybe build something from the ashes. Lila stared at the letter for hours. Not because of the property. Not even because of the apology. But because for the first time in her life, someone who had taken something from her was trying to give it back. And not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The next morning, she found him by the cliffs again. You don't have to stay here, she said. You did your part. He smiled faintly. That's not why I stayed. Then why? Adrian looked at her like he was seeing sunrise for the first time. Because I'm not done discovering who you are. Lila blinked. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to care. But she did. And that terrified her. Over the next few days, something began to shift. They spoke more. Long walks. Shared silences. She showed him the art studio her father once used. A small stone shed at the edge of the forest. Adrian helped her clean it. Restore it. Lila painted again. Adrian smiled again. Sometimes, she caught him watching her like she was the missing color in a life too gray for too long. And sometimes, she let him. But healing isn't linear. One rainy afternoon, Adrian got a call he couldn't ignore. A scandal back in the city. A betrayal inside his company. Millions at risk. He looked at Lila, torn. I have to go, he said. But I'll come back. I swear it. She nodded, eyes unreadable. They all say that. I'm not them. She gave him a small, sad smile. I know. Then she did something neither of them expected. She kissed him. Gentle. Like a question answered. And then she whispered, Don't make me disappear again. He left. And for the first time in years, he left his heart behind. But fate wasn't done with them. The storm was coming. The kind not made of wind and rain, but of truth and consequence. And when it arrived, it would test everything they'd begun to build. Because some love stories don't bloom in safety. They bloom in the ruins. The city skyline returned like a memory Adrian couldn't fully trust, too familiar, too foreign. He had been away only 2 weeks, yet it felt like the world had changed entirely. Maybe it had. Or maybe he had. A part of him remained on those cliffs with Lila Harrow, the girl who once ran from his world and yet somehow had become the only part of it that felt real. But the moment he stepped into Blackwood Holdings' towering headquarters, the weight returned. Cold stares, rushed reports, the suffocating scent of power games and freshly printed betrayal. The crisis was worse than he expected. His CFO, a man Adrian had mentored from the ground up, had been secretly embezzling funds for over a year. Half of the board knew. No one spoke. No one acted. Why would they? Adrian had been absent, mentally long before he physically left. In his hands, he held the paper trail, damning and undeniable. "I need to fix this," Adrian muttered under his breath. But this time he wouldn't bury the truth. He wouldn't become the man who ignored it just to protect an image. This time he would burn the rot down, even if it took the whole tower with it. Meanwhile, back in Averlin, Lila stood in the art studio her father once built. It smelled of turpentine and sea salt, of memories she had tried so long to forget. But now her paintings were different. She painted Adrian, not as the man in magazines or news headlines, but as he was on that beach. Vulnerable, haunted, human. She hated how much she missed him. Every time a car passed the cottage, she peeked through the curtains. Every night she walked the cliff trail alone, part of her half expecting him to return. But he didn't. And soon doubt crept in. Maybe he was like all the others after all. Maybe people didn't change. Days turned into a week. Adrian fought his battle in silence. He called Lila once, but she didn't answer. He didn't blame her. Trust, once broken, doesn't bend easily back into place. Instead, he submitted the evidence to federal investigators. He exposed his own company, his own people. The scandal made headlines within hours. Blackwood Holdings under investigation. CEO leaks evidence against executive team. The media exploded. Some praised him as a whistleblower. Others painted him as a sinking ship. His board retaliated. They issued a vote to remove him as CEO. The company he built was now poised to exile him. But Adrian didn't flinch. Because finally, after years of burying the truth, he had chosen the right side. And somewhere deep down, he hoped Lila would hear about it. That she would know. She did. Lila read the article one morning while sipping cold tea. The headline felt like a punch. Her fingers trembled. He had done it. He had risked everything. For what? For justice. For her. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. She opened it to find a courier holding a familiar package. Inside was a single canvas. Painting. Her painting. It was the one she had left behind in the gallery. The one of Adrian in the storm. On the back a note. "You saw me before I saw myself. Thank you for painting the man I'm trying to become." Lila clutched the canvas to her chest. She had to see him again. The next train to the city was a blur of nerves and unfinished thoughts. She didn't know what she would say. She just knew she couldn't let the moment pass again. Not this time. But as the city skyline emerged, so did another shadow. A woman waited for her at the platform. Tall, sharp eyes and too poised to be accidental. "You're Lila Harrow, aren't you?" Lila froze. "Who's asking?" The woman handed her a card. Vivian Crest. Lead reporter. The Financial Post. "I know about you," she said with a cool smile. "You're the girl who saved Adrian Blackwood's life." "I'm sorry I don't." Vivian cut her off. "Don't bother denying it. I have witnesses, footage, and now motive. You're the daughter of a former employee. The same man Adrian allegedly let fall. Tell me, Miss Harrow, are you his redemption story, or just the plot twist?" Lila's mouth went dry. Vivian leaned in. "Talk to me, and I'll make sure your side gets heard before the tabloids destroy it. I don't want to be part of this." Lila whispered. But you already are. Adrian stood before a room full of investors, trying to salvage what remained of his company's soul. His vote of removal had been delayed, but not cancelled. Every minute counted. Every decision was under fire. And then she walked in. Lila, soaking from the rain, heart in her throat, eyes searching for him. Their gazes met. He froze. She crossed the room without a word and stood beside him, before the entire board, before the press, before the world. I have something to say, she said, voice steady despite her shaking hands. The room murmured. Lila continued. Years ago my father worked here. He tried to do the right thing. And no one listened, including Adrian. But today I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here because someone who once looked away is now fighting to see clearly. Adrian made mistakes, but today he's trying to fix them. And people like that deserve a second chance. The room went silent. Adrian couldn't breathe. She looked at him then, her eyes softer. I forgive you. That night the vote was suspended. Adrian wasn't reinstated. Not yet. But something more powerful had happened. The truth had been spoken. And he wasn't alone anymore. They stood outside the building, rain beginning to fall again. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know. Why did you? Lila looked up at him. Because I believe in the man you're becoming, not the one you were. Adrian stepped closer, the world fading behind them. Then maybe we can become something together. She didn't answer with words. She kissed him instead. And this time she didn't disappear. Rain washed the city that night, but under the soft halo of the streetlight, Adrian and Lila stood unmoved. Two people who had been broken, bent, but somehow found each other at the crossroads of healing. For the first time in years, Adrian didn't feel like he was chasing after something. Not money, not power, not approval. Just her. And for Lila, the weight of her past, the pain, the silence, felt a little lighter, shared in the warmth of someone who had finally learned how to listen. But the world wasn't done testing them. The next morning, Adrian met with a crisis team. Despite the pause in the board's decision, the company was still in the throes of uncertainty. Stocks were volatile. Public trust was on a knife's edge. Still, something had shifted. The media, once ruthless, had softened after Lila's unexpected appearance and quiet speech. She had painted Adrian as something rare in the corporate world, a man willing to ruin himself to do the right thing. Headlines now read, Redemption in real time. CEO exposes own company, gains unexpected ally. It was a good look. But PR couldn't fix what years of corruption had broken. His leadership would be under watch. And any misstep would be his last. Meanwhile, Lila stood alone at the edge of Blackwood Park, the very place where her father used to take her before he worked for Adrian's empire. She sat under the tree where he once carved her initials into the bark. The memory brought tears to her eyes. She wasn't ready to forgive everything. But maybe she could begin by letting go of the hate that had once ruled her heart. A soft voice behind her broke the stillness. I thought I might find you here. He turned. Adrian. He knelt beside her, brushing damp hair from her face. You okay? I don't know, she whispered. It's hard, you know. Feeling like everything's moving forward when a part of you is still stuck back in the pain. I know, he said quietly. But I think maybe we get unstuck when we let someone help pull us forward. He offered his hand. She took it. In the weeks that followed, things between them grew slowly, tenderly. Adrian stepped back from the public eye for a while and let his legal and recovery teams take the lead. For the first time, he didn't need to be in control of everything. He just needed to be real with himself and with her. They moved in together, not into his sprawling penthouse, but into a modest loft on the edge of the city. A place with creaky wooden floors, leaky pipes, and sun that filtered through old curtains like poetry. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. At night, Lila painted again, her colors softer now, brighter. And sometimes Adrian would read next to her, or fall asleep to the soft scratch of her brush. He started writing again too. Not business plans. Letters. One every night. All addressed to her. Some he gave her. Most he kept. It wasn't that he couldn't say things out loud. He just liked the idea of her discovering his feelings over time, folded into quiet words sealed in envelopes. But peace has a way of being brief when it finally arrives. One afternoon, while Lila was out buying paint, Adrian received a message that froze the blood in his veins. It was a single image. Photo. Lila. Sitting alone in the park. Zoomed in. Ended. The caption read, "Still hiding secrets. Thought we should meet. I know more than she thinks." Attached was an address. No name. Just a threat in disguise. Adrian's jaw tightened. He thought the worst was behind them. But shadows always linger where money once played God. He didn't tell Lila. Not yet. Instead, he went to the address the next day. A crumbling rooftop bar, long abandoned, now used by people who preferred privacy over legality. He found a man waiting, greasy smile, eyes like oil. "You, Adrian Blackwood." "I am." "You're the hero now, huh?" the man said. "Funny. You and your girl think the past won't catch up." Adrian didn't flinch. "What do you want?" "I want to remind you that your story ain't as clean as you think. I know about her father. About the cover-up. About what really happened the night he died." Adrian stepped closer. "You don't know anything." "Oh, but I do," the man grinned. "And unless you want the whole world to know too, you'll do what I say." Adrian's fists clenched. This wasn't about money. It was revenge. And it wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at her. He returned home to find Lila painting a portrait of a lighthouse. The edges unfinished. "Hey," she smiled. "Where were you?" He kissed her forehead. "Just a meeting." But she saw it. The tension in his jaw. The shadow in his eyes. "You're hiding something," she said. Adrian hesitated. "I wanted to protect you." "Don't," she whispered. "Not with silence." That's how everything fell apart the first time. He exhaled slowly and told her everything. The photo, the man, the threat. Lila listened quietly, hands tightening around the brush. "I know who that is," she said finally. Adrian blinked. "You do?" She nodded. "His name is Marcus Lyle. He used to work with my father. Right before everything fell apart. My father trusted him. Thought he was helping expose the fraud. But he was using him. Feeding him lies." Adrian's voice was low. "So he's the reason your father was pushed out. And the reason he took his own life," Lila said, her voice breaking. "Marcus poisoned everything." They sat in silence for a long time. Then Lila looked at Adrian with eyes burning with purpose. "We end this. Together." They didn't go to the police. Not yet. Lila had a plan of her own. She met Marcus Lyle the next evening, alone. In a cafe crowded enough to stay safe, but quiet enough for secrets. "You should have stayed hidden," he hissed. "You think you're brave now?" "No," she said calmly. "But I'm no longer scared. You and your rich boyfriend." "He's not saving me," she interrupted. "I'm saving you. Because the moment I leave this table, everything you've done goes to the press. I have the files my father left. And this time, people will listen." He paled. "You're bluffing." She leaned in. "Try me." He stood abruptly and stormed out. But the damage was done. Adrian stepped from a nearby booth. Phone still recording. They had everything they needed. Later that night, they stood on the rooftop of their apartment, watching the city blink beneath them like a galaxy fallen to Earth. "You saved me again," Adrian said softly. "No," Lila whispered. "We saved each other." He kissed her slow and deep and true. Not because it was perfect, but because it was slower than usual and in a world built on illusion. Headlines had shifted again. Not about stock crashes or CEO downfalls, but about a quiet whistleblower from the past whose story was finally being told. Exposed. The man who manipulated a Blackwood executive into ruin. Harrow's legacy reclaimed. Lila's father was no longer a forgotten casualty. He was seen for what he truly was. A man who tried to stand for truth but was buried beneath betrayal. And beside that article, in finer print, Blackwood CO steps aside temporarily, focuses on restoring ethics and advocacy work. Adrian had handed over day-to-day power, not because he was defeated, but because it was time to build something better, something not just for him, but for them. Their apartment was quiet that morning. Adrian brewed coffee while Lila stood by the window, watching clouds drift over the skyline like thoughts she hadn't yet spoken. "You're really stepping back?" she asked. He turned, smile soft. "Yeah, for a while at least. I want to start something new. Something that's more than business." Lila tilted her head. "Like what?" He hesitated, then handed her an envelope, one of the letters he wrote but never gave her. She opened it slowly. The words inside were simple. "Let's build something that doesn't crumble the moment one of us falters. Let's build something that breathes, forgives, and holds light even when shadows try to smother it. I don't want to run anymore, Lila. I want to stay with you. Always." Her hands trembled. "I want to start an art fund," he said softly. "For people like your father. Whistleblowers. Storytellers. Truth-tellers. Artists who lose everything because they dared to speak. I want to name it after him. The Harrow Initiative." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "You'd really do that?" He stepped closer. "You already taught me how to see people. Now I want to help the world see them too." The weeks that followed became a new kind of story. Not one built on dramatic twists or corporate betrayals, but on mornings spent painting together, evenings reading old letters by candlelight, midnights wrapped in whispered promises and slow forgiveness. They traveled, not to flashy cities or elite hideaways, but to small towns, coastlines, forests, places that breathed, places that reminded them what it felt like to be alive. Lila began painting publicly again, this time not under a pseudonym, not in the shadows. Her work sold not because of who she was dating but because it made people feel, because it whispered truth in a world addicted to noise. And Adrian. He began speaking too, not as a CEO but as a man who fell and stood again. At charity events, schools, youth shelters. He told the story of the girl who saved him not once but twice. Not with CPR, but with belief, with kindness, with silence that meant something. One day, a year later, they returned to Averlin. The cliffs hadn't changed. The sea still roared, wild and unapologetic. They stood where it all began, where Lila had pulled him from the edge. He took her hand. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked. She smiled. "Every day. I never told you something," he said. She turned to him. "I wasn't just drunk that night. I was gone. Hollow. I wasn't sure I wanted to keep living." Her breath caught. "I know," she whispered. "I think," he continued, voice breaking, "I was waiting for someone to prove there was still something good in the world. And then you found me," she said softly. "No," he whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You found me." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. Inside, a simple ring. No diamonds. Just a polished silver band, etched with waves and stars. "I don't need a perfect life," he said. "But I want one where I wake up next to the girl who saved mine." Lila's eyes shimmered. "You once disappeared without a word," he added. "This time stay." She smiled through tears. "I'm not going anywhere." They were married in a meadow near Averlin, barefoot, surrounded by ocean wind, wildflowers, and the small circle of people who truly knew their story. There was no press, no spectacle, just two souls finally at peace. Years later, their love story became part of the Harrow Initiative's first published memoir collection, a book of stories from survivors, fighters, and quiet heroes. On the dedication page, in Lila's handwriting, "To the man who finally chose truth over power. To the girl who found her voice by saving someone else's. To all who disappear in silence. May you return in strength. Because sometimes, the quietest people carry the loudest hearts. And sometimes the ones who walk away return when it matters most.